Hi, I'm Loretta Bush, President and CEO for Authority Health. In July, we celebrated National Family Month. It was a good opportunity to promote the enrichment of families through education, health, and self-improvement. Now, summertime is also an excellent opportunity for families to get together, to celebrate the connection, and also to celebrate our rich heritage. Studies have shown that spending time together can foster a greater connection, foster communication, create mutual appreciation, also foster respect among family members, build confidence and self-esteem. You know, the other important thing is that it really can build important memories and enrich family life and the family dynamics. Now, I can think of no better person to join me today to talk about the importance of family, and particularly the importance of the relationship of the Black family, than Miss Kenyatta Stephens. She is the CEO of Black Family Development. Kenyatta, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Loretta.
All right. So let's get started by just sharing with our listeners kind of the history of Black Family Development, the mission, and really just the rich history, just to get us right set and to just give us a foundation of what the organization is about.
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. Black Family Development was started in 1978 by the Detroit chapter of the National Association of Black Social Workers. And during that time, there was an absolute need for African American specialty organizations that believed in the preservation of families. As an organization, 44 years later, we still have that vision, we still have that commitment, and we are a comprehensive family services organization serving children, adolescents, seniors, families, for the purpose of really making sure that they have optimal wellness. We do that through a variety of programming, mental health prevention and treatment, substance abuse services, family preservation, child welfare, etc.
Very good. Now I want to focus in on one of the things that you talked about, because I think Black Family Development has like 7 core commitments. Do I have that right? And one of those core commitments, I think you mentioned in your overview, I heard the words, the well-being of children. Can we talk about that a little bit more, and why is the well-being of children so important?
That is a great question. The well-being of children is critical because it is developed in the context of families. Family was created as the first institution.
Yes.
It is within that institution that children develop their identity. So as an organization, we certainly prioritize the service of children and youth, but you cannot do that in the absence of the family.
Right.
A lot of research really has supported that idea that children and the healthy development of children is absolutely nurtured in the context of family. Mm-hmm. In fact, in 2021, there was a recent article entitled America's Children that came out by a pretty prestigious federal group, identifying that it is within the context of a family that children develop their sense of purpose, yes, their understanding of their economic potential, yes, their understanding of health, and how to exemplify that health. The article goes on to say that in the absence of that kind of supportive, nurturing structure, not only does that child not develop, but they don't develop that sense of self or that sense of economy that our society depends on as they become productive adults. And so we focus on children, and we do that in the context of family, not just for the child, not just for the family, but for the betterment of our nation.
That's amazing, and you know, you've said it so well, and it's so important because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like in past times there was so much dismantling of the family, and particularly of the African American family, and particularly if there were struggles within the family. Instead of trying to unify the family and thinking of ways to overcome some of the hardships, and there can be hardships in all families, but some families can be more resilient than others. They may have more resources than others. And in times past, there seemed to either be the thought or the practice that it was better to remove a child from the Black family and put them somewhere else. But what you're articulating is just amazing, and it's healthy. You know, that the well-being of a child is in the context of a family.
That's right.
And
That's
their
right.
family.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that family must be safe.
That's right.
That family must be a place where we're not inducing more trauma for a child.
That's right.
But it also is important to have a network of support.
Yeah.
So that that family has resources to learn resiliency.
Yes.
They have resources when their own internal resources perhaps are depleted and must depend and request the assistance of outside resources. And so that's how our organization comes in. We partner with families. Yeah. We don't come in as the experts. We firmly believe our value set is that the family is the expert in what they need, and they're the expert in the solution. What we do is we help restore, we bring resources, and we partner with that family to actualize those resources in a way that promotes their own well-being.
That's important. So let's talk about that first year of life for a child. It's a critical time for healthy development. And so how do we foster family life during that period, and especially among single-parent family units?
That is an outstanding question. One of the things that we think is imperative is that to be a human service agency, we must take in what science has to share with us, perhaps chew on it a bit, and present it back to our families in a way that is digestible and usable or actionable. And so one of the things that we love to really talk with families about is what happens in the child's brain.
Yeah.
And what's amazing that, Loretta, a lot of people don't know is that even in the womb, as a child is developing, generally on average, children are 6 pounds. One of those pounds is the brain. And so when you think about the perspective of how important brain development even is in utero, one of the things that we share with parents is never forget to talk to your baby. Yes. Your baby hears. Several weeks in after conception, the child can hear, and they begin to recognize hearing the consistency of a mother's voice.
Yes.
We say sing, share music, particularly instrumental music that has rhythm and cadence, because it begins to help the brain formation. Yes. We then talk about that as that baby comes right out of the body, right out of the mother's body, that generally brain development takes place 1% every day.
Yes.
So the neurons are moving very fast to try to understand what's happening in the environment. That is why, as single parents, we share, provide that consistent ongoing communication or speech, because that child who was listening to your voice while comfortably in your womb now more than ever has entered a strange environment and needs the consistency of that same voice that was once familiar. And then by age 2, oh my goodness, some parents will say, why does my child ask so many questions? It's because at that point, that is when the synapses in the brain, those neurological connections, are one of the most plentiful of all times. And so that child is full of discovery and wonder. And so we share with parents, ironically, help them ask more questions, but be patient. So perhaps think about low-cost exploratory ideas. I think about, we all have pots and pans.
Yes.
Use those, create instruments. Go outside when it rains and take a cup, put some dirt in it, and let it fill with water to create mud, and give them that experience of literally touching, seeing what the mud feels like. But I think for single parents, we're all busy. We gotta just self-care. Yeah. Because those questions come. And so the more that we self-care, the more that we're in a space, in a condition emotionally and psychologically to answer those questions that children ask. Because
they can feel overwhelming.
They can feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you're giving low-cost, kind of natural ways to help your children explore. Now I have to ask this question, and when I ask it, I want the listeners to understand that I'm definitely not opposed to technology, and I'm not a anti-YouTuber. Most days I'm not an anti-YouTuber, but I hear you loud and clear when you're saying that your fetus is listening. Then when they come out, they can hear, and so now should we be careful about what's playing in the background? You're saying, oh well, this kid is young. They don't understand that I have this horror movie on all the time, or I'm listening to these things that are very grown up and can be very scary or very violent, which we understand the difference between, fantasy and reality, and TV violence and real violence and everything. But what do you say to parents about, maybe controlling some of that background noise, around a mind that is so fertile and taking everything in and hearing everything? And again, I'm not an anti-media technology, listeners, but it's a question that, that needs to be answered.
It's a wonderful question, and it's a hard question because you're right. Sometimes media plays a role in almost every facet of our lives, so it begs the question, what can we do, what should we do, what should we not do? One of the things that we talk about in one of our programs that's called Lena Start is we have the privilege of working with parents from the ages of, who have children from birth up to 33 months, and they ask very similar questions. And we begin to actually show them data about what happens when environmental stimuli such as media, computers, YouTube are interplay in their home versus what happens to a child's brain when they're using their own mouths for conversational turns, or even when they're reading to their child. And what is absolutely fascinating, Loretta, is that what we see that parents wound up pairing back to us is, oh, my child talks to me so much when I'm talking to them and the TV or the computer isn't on. And so it's wonderful where parents, as they see the changes in the number of what are called conversational turns, where a child is talking back to them, that they say, this isn't happening the same way when the TV or the computer's on. The other thing that your statement in question bears discussing is what happens neurologically with children. Sometimes for the purpose of continuing to keep you and I engaged in a show or a YouTube channel, voices elevate, loud sounds appear to kind of get our attention with the effect of startling us. Well, as you mentioned, we're adults. We have the neurological maturity to know, oh, they're just trying to get my attention to refocus on the screen. Children don't have that ability to synthesize through and understand, and it really can be trauma-inducing. Even down to the word choices that are sometimes used in the television or shows that we watch as adults. Those words are confusing and sometimes fear-inducing, so we do need to be careful.
Very careful, yeah. So let's talk about the elders.
Yes.
I love talking about the elders.
Yes.
So Black elders represent an important connection to the family legacy.
Absolutely.
They just do. And modern life tends sometimes to separate elders from the family. That didn't used to be, but modern times tends to separate. Do you see that occurring in the Black family? And, what do you think are the effects of that? And if you think that there's negative effects, how can we reconnect to that? And is it important to try to reconnect with that?
And that is a great question. I think that every culture needs to be careful or guard against this cultural drift away from the wisdom of elders. But I think particularly we must guard against it as an African American culture. Much of our culture, particularly you and I know, you don't see it reflected in the history books.
That's right.
It was a spoken historical storytelling that was passed on to the ages. Wisdom about grooming hair was taught by the big mamas, taught their own children, who taught their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so that kind of connection is essential for the stability, the comfort, the nurturing of our own people.
Yes.
And so, yes, it is something that we see. I think socioeconomic drifts and changes, even environmental changes such as COVID, has created a separation perhaps from loved ones.
Absolutely.
But I wonder if we perhaps could rethink this as a new paradigm. Perhaps we could think about, because this is essential to reconnect with our elders, perhaps we could think about technology as a way to do that.
Oh.
That maybe we could think about Zoom calls. I know that my family, after the outbreak of COVID happened, we began to talk electronically or by text in ways and frequency that we should have been doing before the pandemic.
Right.
I think that sometimes we see families trying Sunday dinners. That's something so common in our culture.
Yeah.
But what if Sunday dinners can be done by each of us having a plate through Zoom? So that there's a way to pass down history, there's a way to make connections and stories, even when we cannot be physically present. Again, low-cost ways of thinking about engagement. The other idea, that often flutters in my own head is because it's something that I use with my own grandfather. I remember hearing from a friend how important it was to think about a strategic question that you wanted to ask an elder before you knew you were going to speak with them. And just as one example, I asked my grandfather, what brought you to Detroit? Simple question, didn't cost me anything.
Right.
But the wealth of insight that I learned about him and my own family was worth millions.
That is really good. I have a similar experience just talking to one of the elders about his love of cooking. And he passed down a cookbook prior to him passing prematurely. And so every family member got the cookbook, but there was a story about almost every recipe. So that whole heritage and all of the stories that just got passed down through that one simple question, that love of cooking and how did that come to be. Yes. So, and it doesn't cost you anything. And they love to share the stories, and you get that rich connection and heritage. Yep. Let's stay along that same vein, but changing up just a little bit, because discovering our roots and talking about our heritage can also be very important in understanding our health risks. So, and this is an area that in the past, many times we didn't want to talk about it, but knowing our family medical history is very important. It can help us understand what's going on with our own health. It can help physicians really pinpoint what's going on with us, either with our physical health or with our mental health. It doesn't mean that what happened to grandmother and grandfather is necessarily going to happen to us, but sometimes it can help to tell the story. Why is it that even though, I'm eating right and doing the best I can, why is my blood pressure still very difficult to get under control? Or why is my cholesterol? Or why do I tend to have a struggle with anxiety or depression? And, we typically, in the past at least, didn't really talk about that in families. So developing a family medical tree isn't always a popular topic. Have you found ways to get that type of discussion going at Black Family Development?
Good question. Loretta, all that you spoke about in terms of sometimes the secrecy about our health, whether it's our physical health or our mental health, really has itself rooted in stigma in the Black community. Where if it was a mental health situation, sometimes people have been labeled as crazy.
Right.
If it was diabetes, then sometimes it's called sugar, and we aren't necessarily comfortable going into the details about it. And so one of the ways that we think about having difficult conversations, and it's really based upon the social science of restorative practices, is you use I statements, but you begin with strengths.
Okay.
And so one of the ways that may look like is, mom, dad, big mama, auntie, I love how when you were raising us, you only allowed us to drink milk and water. Thank you for that, because it taught me how to be healthy. And then moving into an open-ended question, we are still very private as a community, And so if given the opportunity for a yes or no question, we're going to give a yes or no answer. And so we recommend start with an open-ended question. What did your elders teach you about being healthy? So then it again passes on a historical story that gives us knowledge and information. And then we tiptoe into it, but we go a little deeper. And then we say something like, what are the sicknesses that have impacted family members in our family line? And so it's gradually, but still intentionally, opening the door and allowing the stories to come in so that then we can dig down a little bit deeper. And one of the things that I find interesting and that we've actually been talking about in our own families with our own elders, because we're so blessed to have several of them with us, is where would I find a list of all of your medication? Or where would I find a list of your doctors? Because some of our elders may not be comfortable talking about all the medications and may not even feel comfortable feeling as though they know the specific prescription, and they don't need to.
Yep.
But if there's a way we can pass on information and still make sure that people are healthy and still pass on family information, those are just some examples of how to do so.
Excellent. So today we've been talking with Kenyatta Stephens, CEO of Black Family Development, regarding Black family well-being. Black Family Development offers programs to help strengthen the family. You can learn more about Black Family Development by visiting their website at blackfamilydevelopment.org. We at Authority Health, we also share that commitment to the Black family. Our family medicine practice, along with our pediatric practice, is geared for the whole family. You can reach out to us if you're looking for a primary care doctor or a pediatrician at 313-824-1000 and then follow the prompts. Ms. Stephens, it has been a pleasure talking to you this afternoon, this morning, whichever time someone's going to be watching this particular show. Do you have any closing remarks?
I just encourage all of our listeners to continue to prioritize your health and the health of your loved ones. As an organization, we are committed to support and link arms with families. Loretta has shared our contact information, but we are always available through our contact information at 313-758-0150, and it is our pleasure to serve the Detroit and Greater Detroit community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. As always, knowledge is power. We'll see you next time.